Visualize Your Social Data, the Power of a Social Measurement API, brought to you by Simply Measured and Tableau. My name is Lucy Hitz. I'm the Content Marketing Manager at Simply Measured, and I'll be moderating this webinar today. Before I begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items.
Please stand by while your recording connection is established.
First, our hashtag is VisYourSocial. Use this hashtag when talking about our webinars.
This conference is being recorded.
Sorry about that, guys. We're just recording this so you can catch it after. First, our hashtag is VisYourSocial. Use this hashtag when talking about our webinar on Twitter. And next, this webinar is being recorded, as you just heard, and will be available later this afternoon along with the slides. If you have any technical issues throughout the webinar, please use the question box to communicate with us and we'll help you. And we'll be collecting questions throughout the entire webinar, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible during the Q&A session at the end. So submit your text questions by typing them in the questions pane of the control panel. If we don't get to your question during the webinar, we'll do our best to follow up on all of them via email. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you would complete it and provide your feedback. Once again, we are recording this presentation, and we'll make it available later today, and we'll follow up with an email as well. So now I'd like to introduce you to our presenters today. With us, we have Michelle, the Senior Product Marketing Coordinator at Tableau, and Aviel, a Simply Measured co-founder and our VP of Product. Hi, guys.
Hey, Lucy.
So welcome to you both. Today, we'll be talking about what a social analytics API is, and give you pro tips for visualizing your own social data. So I'm going to pass it along now to our experts and get this party started.
All righty. This is Aviel. Great to be here. Hope you all are having a great morning. So I want to get us started with just a couple questions. We'd love your answers to help us tailor the presentation. So the first is, what kind of company do you work at? Is it a B2B company, B2C combination? And here's the poll, so we'd appreciate your answers. I'll give you a little while here to fill that in. Great. I see a lot of you are, that's actually pretty interestingly split between B2B and B2C, so that is super good to know. All right. I love seeing these answers. This just makes it so much easier to know who you're talking to. All right, so I'm going to pop over to the next one. So which best describes how you work with data? So do you use a social analytics tool, an all-in-one social tool, integrate with a BI tool, rely on native analytics, or don't do much with social? I imagine it could be a bunch, but it'd be great to know the one that best describes what you do today. Super interesting to see. It seems like a bunch of you are using social analytics tools and a bunch rely on native analytics, which makes a ton of sense if right now you're having to combine data from a bunch of those tools and bring it into your BI platform. So it's super interesting to see. Great. Wow. Yeah, these answers are fantastic. All right, so knowing that, I'm going to pass it over to Michelle to talk about the 3 keys of visualizing data.
Great. Thank you, Aviel. It's so great to see those responses as well. Kind of helps us get to know all of you and what you're currently working with for your social analytics. So obviously our webinar today is about visualizing data, but I thought we would take a quick step back and talk about why you should visualize your data in the first place. Data visualization is not just about making charts and graphs. It's really about using our own natural ability as human beings to process information visually. Data visualization, and specifically exploring your data visually, helps you uncover the stories that your data has to tell. This interactive visualization, which is built with Tableau using Simply Measured data, shows the amount of content posted over time by a brand and broken down by channel. The type of content is designated by color. So for instance, links show up in blue, and the size of each circle represents the amount of engagement that piece of content got. And this is a bar chart. that shows the same data but in a slightly different way. Rather than showing total engagements, this chart actually looks at the number of engagements per post for each content type. What we can see is that although it's harder to see the engagement with the videos in the timeline, they actually come up as one of the most engaging pieces of content. They're tied almost with photos in terms of engagement per post. And when you can explore your data and see it from different angles in this way, you can really start to see the full story in your data.
Here, get that guy right there, the arrow.
All right, sorry guys. When you explore your data visually, you can also respond to new questions as they arise. This chart shows the amount of engagements that a brand gets for every hour of the day. The size of the line represents the number of posts that were sent at that time. So not surprisingly, we see a big spike in engagements right around 3 p.m., and that's also at a time when that brand is posting the most. So not too surprising. But I wonder if that's the same for every single day. I'd like to dive beneath the surface. We can actually look at how this varies by day of the week. And here we see an interesting story. We see that same similar spike right around 3 p.m. every single day of the week. However, on Monday, something different is happening. There's a second spike right around 7 p.m. And that also corresponds to when there aren't a whole lot of posts. So obviously there was a really engaging post or several engaging posts that were sent at that time. If I couldn't slice and dice my data as new questions arose, I might not be able to go beneath the surface like this with my analysis.
The exploration aspect of this is, I think, one of the things that really excites me the most about this integration because, being in charge of product at a social analytics company, there's this line that you have to walk, and it can be challenging because we want to be able to provide all of the potential, paths and visualizations for our customers to actually be able to solve the social, to answer the social questions that they have. But at the same time, we don't want to overwhelm them with, here's every possible way of looking at this data that's not helpful. So I just love seeing this example because by going through this integration, you can put the data into an exploration tool like Tableau, and you can actually explore and build something that's relevant to your business.
Absolutely. And this visualization wouldn't necessarily be relevant to every social media team. So the power of this is that you can build visualizations and explore the data in the way that works for you to answer your own specific questions. So finally, a third really important reason to visualize your data is to have a greater impact when you're communicating your findings with other people. If you've discovered an important story in your data and you want to use that insight to drive change, then you want to be able to communicate your insight in a way that makes sense for your business. This is a dashboard that was built with Simply Measured data in Tableau. And Tableau is a drag and drop interface. So each part of this dashboard was built flexibly to meet a specific set of needs. All of the visualizations, the titles, etc. And I can quickly compare on this dashboard brands' performance on Twitter, and I can analyze the effect of different media. I can even see some top influencers. Some of the views even act as filters for other views. Again, all of this is flexible, and building a dashboard like this is a self-service process.
And Michelle, we're going to go into that later and actually dig into this dashboard, right?
Yeah, we're going to build a dashboard from scratch.
That's awesome. Cool. So, now that you have the, high-level idea of some of the things that we can do, and we're going to dig into that much at the end of this as far as, actually building a dashboard and all the different things you can do, the integration, I want to talk about a bit about what makes all this possible. And where I want to start is with the Simply Measured platform. So we've been hard at work here over the past year building the next generation of our platform. And this Tableau integration is built on top of our new API, and this is one of the first ways that we're starting to show that power. When we first started this company, we focused pretty heavily on reports, and over time the social matured, and social has essentially become the number one place to go for real-time marketing. We've moved in the direction of offering more real-time dashboarding and reporting. That's something we actually have in beta now and are rolling out on an ongoing basis. In the past couple weeks, we also announced our API, and when you say why release an API, it's been really interesting watching as social has matured in that people really want to measure social in the context of their business, not necessarily in the context of what a specific tool can allow. And an API really opens up a ton of those opportunities. And behind all this is more than raw data. What we've actually built here is an analytics API that lets you actually provide actionable insights. So whether it be data in the context of the exact metrics that you're looking at or more complex questions, we support all of that. And currently the API supports Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube. Currently the Tableau integration supports the first 4 and is going to have YouTube in the very, very near future. So one other thing to note about the API is that it's compatible with any tool, but as we know, Tableau is the leader in data visualization. We wanted to make it as easy as possible to integrate with their world-class tool. So there's 2 specific use cases for the API that's powering this integration, and should be pretty clear which one of them we're leveraging here, and I think we're actually going to touch on both throughout this. And the first is custom reporting and analysis. Social data cannot live in a silo. Like there are very real reasons to pull it into your own internal database, leverage the tools that you're already using, and create custom dashboards and metrics that let you measure and visualize the data in the exact way that you want with your business. And that's one of the main reasons that we designed this API. And the second piece, which also is along that siloing line, is help you integrate with other data sources. I don't want to steal Michelle's thunder, but she's going to show some really cool stuff about how she's actually going to integrate the Simply Measured data into some other data sources to help her with more holistic digital marketing measurement. Because, at the end of the day, social is great, but if you are not able to look at it in the same context as some of the rest of your business KPIs, that puts you at a disadvantage. So one of the main goals of this API is to break down that wall and break down that silo. So quickly, what makes the Social Analytics API different from some of the other things that are out there? So the first thing is that we do unification of the engagement signals across all channels. When we first started Simply Measured, people would use the words like, how's my Twitter account performing? How's my Facebook page performing? But now people are saying, how am I doing on social? It's no longer a Twitter campaign, it's a social campaign. So we make it extremely easy to put the data in the right context and the right format for you to be able to do cross-channel measurement. And the next is an analytics layer on top of the data. So the API, again, is not just a data API, but you can specifically query that API to ask questions like, what were the top 5 video posts made by my competitors over the past year? And you can slice and dice that. So it really is a very powerful engine. And we're also providing, an unmatched dimension of flexibility and custom metrics because at the end of the day, we all want to look at the data in the way that our business needs to, and customization is a very, very key component to that. So to go back to the Tableau integration, which is what we're going on today, so how does that work? So this is actually a connection built via a Tableau Web Data Connector. So what that means is that you don't have to go through IT. There's no database. There's no modeling. This is a self-service integration. All you have to do is go into Tableau, click Web Data Connector, connect to Simply Measured, and then you'll be logged into your Simply Measured account. You'll be able to select your various data sources, and you'll be able to select what you actually want to pull out and into Tableau. So it really is that simple, and it's extremely powerful. And one of the things that's the most exciting to me in this, too, is that once you've actually built your dashboard on top of it, you can actually keep the data up to date by refreshing it. So, in a very real way, you can build in the own tools and environments that you're used to your own social analytics product that really serves the need of your business, and Simply Measured via our API is here to power that. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Michelle to talk about, some of the cool stuff that she's doing on top of this already.
Great. Thanks, Abigail. So I've been at Tableau for nearly 3 years now, and I manage Tableau's global social media programs. So as both a product marketer and a social media manager, I often get questions about how to do social media analytics well. And I found that as I visualize our data and as I explore Tableau's own social media data, there are a couple of common tips and tricks that I return to time and again. And I wanted to share these tips and tricks for visualizing and analyzing social data well. And then we're actually going to dive into a demo to show them in action. So the first tip is one of the common challenges that I see is that social media data is so robust. There's so many things that you can analyze within it, so many fields, that it can be kind of difficult to focus. And I find that by defining your goals first, it becomes easier to dive in and focus on what's most relevant to you within the data source. Now, this also relates to my second tip, which is to analyze the data that matters to you. You should always be focusing on the metrics and the data sources that are relevant and important to you. Now, say you can look at the number of mentions that you get on Twitter. If that metric isn't actually valuable for the questions and the goals that you have, you don't need to analyze it just because it's there and available for you. The third tip really is all about digging deeper. It's, I think, often a gut instinct to measure your performance on social based on simply the sheer number of engagements that you got on a campaign or looking at the number of mentions that you have. And those benchmarks can be a really great place to start. But I encourage you to dig deeper. Go beyond just tracking the benchmarks and dig into the stories. Look at the why in your data, and we'll see this in action. And of course, this means that you need to be able to respond flexibly to your data. As you're exploring your data, be prepared to dive into new questions as they arise. And that, yes, this means that you should iterate. My first tip is to define your goals first, but with this, I'm actually saying, hey, maybe your goals and your questions change as you're digging into your data. That is perfectly fine. Defining your goals gives you a place to start, and then you can iterate from there. Finally, remember the reason why you're exploring your data in the first place. The reason why we explore data is because we have a question or a problem that we want to solve. So don't just visualize your data and leave it at that. Use it to make an impact in your business.
That last part just rings so true. I mean, that's one thing that forever has been a frustration. I know people with social is that, you look at what are the different ways that we're able to measure based off of what does this dashboard provide, what does this tool provide. And if really what you're looking at is something different, you're kind of in a tough spot. So what you're talking about there couldn't resonate more, and I think you're about to show us why.
Pretty excited for our demo here coming up. So before we dive in, we wanted to ask one final poll just to kind of get a feel for what your familiarity is with Tableau so far. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll, and we'll give a minute or two for responses.
It looks like a pretty interesting mix here.
Yeah. There's certainly a wide range.
It could be useful to just, maybe give a little bit of a high level on Tableau before we dive in.
Absolutely. It looks like we have a number of people who are familiar with Tableau and several people who haven't seen it before at all. So I'm pretty excited to go ahead and dive right into it now. So I'm going to open up Tableau here. And what you're seeing on screen is Tableau Desktop. This is our drag and drop visualization tool. Now, before we dive in, there are a couple of things that I want to point out so you know kind of how the tool is laid out and how you can interact with it. On the left-hand side is what we call the data pane. This shows information about the data sources or data source that you've connected Tableau to. And you can also see all of the fields contained within your data source. Now, Tableau automatically recognizes certain things about the fields in your data source. You can see that it's divided your data fields into dimensions versus measures. Now, dimensions are categorical information, like the type of content, and measures are numerical information, like the number of engagements that it's received. Tableau also recognizes date fields and geographic fields as well. So what I have here is I've already actually loaded in some simply measured data, and what it's looking at is mentions of Tableau on Twitter. Now, we talked about starting with your goals first, so I want to start by giving some context on a specific question that we have for our business. At Tableau, we have a very community-focused approach to social media. And by that, I mean we have a very active and engaged and supportive community on social media. And one of the big goals of our social media program is to nurture and enable our community. And so I have a very specific question with this data that's relevant to our social media program. I want to know what the impact of the influencers in our community is. And for that, mentions data is really valuable. So what I want to do is I actually just want to start out by just getting a quick sense of how many mentions we're getting. In my data pane, I can see a field called number of records, and I'm just going to double click on that and see what happens. And here I can see that we have, I can see the sheer number of mentions that we've gotten. Over 5,000, and that looks pretty great to me. But I have no context for this. I don't know if this happened in the past day or in the past year. So I actually have a date field in my data source, and I'm going to drag and drop it out onto the view. Tableau allows me to choose the level I'd like to see it at. And here now I have some context, and a story is starting to emerge. I can see that mentions go up during the week and go down during the weekend. Now I can do more. I have a content type field, and I'm going to drag that out onto the view. Now I'm slicing and dicing by content type. I'm going to go ahead and change this to an area chart so it's a little bit easier to see. Take a look at that. Now we can see links versus photos versus text, and that we don't get a whole lot of mentions on video. And this is helpful. I'm going to go ahead and call what I've created mentions over time. But now I have a new question. I really want to see the influencers themselves. I want to see who is contributing to this conversation. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate what I've just created and build off of it. We can actually see the individual people who are posting mentions in our Simply Measured data. And what I actually want to do is I want to create a filter. In Tableau, you can create a filter in a drag and drop way. And I want to filter by the top 10 people who've mentioned us the most. To do that, I just select my display name, which is the Twitter display name of the mentioners, and I'm going to drag it out onto my canvas underneath where it says filters. Now, there are many different options for how I can filter my data, but I want to take a look at our top 10 mentioners. So I'm going to click on this tab that says top, and I'm simply going to select by field. Now I could change this to top 10, top 25. I could customize this. I could even do bottom, but I'm pretty happy with top 10. So I'll go ahead and click OK. And now what I'd like to do, I can see the mentions by our top 10 mentioners, but I actually want to see those people, right? So I'm going to take that and drag that out onto the view as well. And I'm going to take content type off of color just to make it a little bit easier to see the patterns here. So here we can now see a timeline of when our top 10 mentioners are mentioning us over this period of time. I can see, when those conversations are happening. And I'm noticing some trends. We have some people who are mentioning us very frequently. I'm going to just select a couple of them. Let's see. And I can actually group these together in an ad hoc way. I'm going to go ahead and do what's called a set in Tableau. And I'm going to call this set frequent mentioners. This is a grouping that I've made ad hoc of users who are mentioning us frequently. And now I can actually use this ad hoc grouping in further analysis. So I could do things like take this and color code by our frequent mentioners. I'm going to go ahead and name what I've created frequent mentioners.
And what is subtle here, but just so key, is that you're actually interacting with the data and you're laying in some specific context to how you are looking at social, which is that for Tableau, those frequent mentioners are influencers who are extremely relevant to what you do, and you want to look at them specially and build a visualization to stay on top of it.
Absolutely.
And that's something that this integration makes possible.
I'm able to create that in an ad hoc way. I can see that pattern, and then I can manipulate my data based on the patterns that I'm seeing simply by visualizing it. So this is really helpful, but I now have another question. I've talked about Tableau's community-focused approach. We actually have a program called the Tableau Ambassadors, which recognizes people who are very active and supportive in our community, including social media. We have, I think, 17 or 18 Tableau social media ambassadors, and I actually want to take a look at what they're doing, their actual mentions on social media. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take, grab the display name field and drag it out onto our canvas. And here I see everyone who's mentioned us. But I've actually already created a grouping of Tableau ambassadors very similar to how I created that frequent mentioners grouping. And I'm actually now going to filter by that grouping. And now I simply see the Tableau ambassadors on the view. And I can quickly take a look at how many times they've mentioned us in this time period. I can also sort this really quickly. And now I have a look specifically at the mentions that are sent by these Tableau ambassadors. This is a really relevant question for us and our social media program. Now, there are a couple other things I want to do really quickly before we move on. I actually have a URL field in my Simply Measured data source, and I'm actually going to drag it out onto our canvas, and we're going to see something cool that I can do with this in just a moment. But the URL field is really helpful for us. And I'm then going to take the content type field and drag it out onto our canvas so we can see how, the type of content that people are posting when they mention us. I'm going to go ahead and call this mentions by ambassadors. Great. And so now, actually, I have a new question. I've been exploring my data, and I have something else I wanted to answer. So I'm actually going to go back to my original visualization that I created, that timeline. And you know what? I've been looking at mentions, but what I'm really, really interested in and what's really specific to our program goals, I want to actually look at engagements. I want to go beyond the benchmark of mentions. So I'm actually going to take my engagements field and replace my previous, how I was previously looking at it in terms of number of mentions. I'm going to take content type off of color to keep it really simple here so I can simply see the volume of mentions. And now I'm going to take a look simply at the engagements for content that's posted by these Tableau ambassadors. So I'm going to now filter that based on the Tableau ambassadors. And now I have a really specific visualization here. This is quite different than the original visualization. This is looking at engagements with content that was posted by Tableau ambassadors. This is now really specific to us. So in just a few minutes, I've been able to answer a couple of questions about the impact that influencers are having in our community. I've also been able to answer a few new questions as they arose. But now I want to do more. I want to be able to flexibly, I actually want to be able to bring in some Google Analytics data. All of our social media ambassadors are actually active bloggers. And I have another data source that I think would be really, really helpful for us to look at in context with this. I'm actually going to open up a new sheet, and we'll take a look at this Google Analytics data source, which I've already connected to. Tableau also has a native connector to Google Analytics. And what I want to take a look at is I want to see which Tableau ambassador blogs are referring traffic to our website. Now, I have a field for the source, which is the blog name, and I also have a field for the number of visits that it's sent to our website. Now, I know I want to visualize this, but I don't know exactly how. So Tableau has a tool called Show Me that allows me to see and quickly access some common visualization types when I select certain fields in my data source. Now, Tableau is going to automatically highlight which visualizations I can create with the fields I selected in my data source. I think I'm going to go ahead and create a tree map from this. And Tableau automatically creates a tree map looking at referrals to our website from our social media ambassadors' blogs. Now, I want to be clear that Tableau is actually just dragging and dropping those fields to create this common visualization type. You can still completely modify this visualization in a drag and drop way. This is simply a shortcut. But I have a new question now. This is showing me some of the top blogs that referred traffic to our website. But I'd really like to see the pages that people landed on when they came to our website from one of these blogs. So I'm actually going to take my page field and replace source on this visualization. And now I can see where people are landing on our website. I'm going to go ahead and call this Referrals by Ambassadors.
So I know what you're about to do with this, but I can't say how excited. I'm literally, the second that you connect these two, I'm going to call out and just reiterate what you're doing. Insanely powerful.
Yeah, so we now have a view that looks at Google Analytics data, and we have a view that looks at Twitter data. And these are the same people. These blogs are created by the same people who are sending these mentions. So what I want to do next is I want to bring these together, and I want to blend these data sources. So let's take a quick look at these two different data sources. In my mentions of Twitter users data source, I have a field called creation date. And in my influencer blogs Google Analytics source, I have a field called date. Now, I can go ahead and change the alias for a field name. I can just rename it. I'm going to call this one creation date as well. Now, I'm just simply changing the alias of this field in Tableau. And take a look at this. Tableau is now telling me, oh, I think that these two fields are the same. So I can actually click on this, and now I'm blending these two data sources. Now we can take this a step further, and we can actually bring them together on a dashboard. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a dashboard. And this is a drag and drop way for us to bring multiple visualizations together. I'm going to go ahead and size this for my screen, and I'm going to bring a couple of visualizations together. I'm going to start with my timeline, then I'm going to add the bar chart, and then I'm going to add the tree map. I can drag and drop these elements around as I please. I'll do just a couple of simple formatting things. There we go. But now what I really want to do is have these views interact with each other. So the top timeline I can actually use as a filter. And I can use any of these as a filter, but I'm going to use the timeline. And now what I can do is I can click on any date, and the two bottom views will filter to show specifically what's happening on that date.
So to just pause and think about this for a second, like this to me really highlights the power of the API we've built and the power of this integration, which is that you just being within this tool, you've been able to connect through Simply Measured to all of your social data, Google Analytics to your web data, and you've been able to build this dashboard that is the exact dashboard that you need to answer this question, and you've actually taken social data out of its silo and you've put it in context with the other data. So the amount of work required to do this, imagine, I don't know how you do this without Tableau, but without the Simply Measured integration, you would be in a lot of trouble too. So actually these two things combined really puts the power of social in a place where it's so easy through Tableau for you to connect to the rest of your data.
Yeah, and the direct connection with Simply Measured and the direct connection with Google Analytics and being able to combine and blend these data sources without writing any code, this allows me to focus on the questions that I specifically have. So there are a couple of quick things I'm going to do to wrap up our dashboard, and then I'm going to show a couple of other examples of what you can build with the Simply Measured connector. Well, we noticed earlier, or I pointed out, that there's a URL field in the data source, specifically in this particular view. I'm going to quickly do one simple thing with the URL field. I'm going to create what's called a URL action. I'm simply going to select Add Action URL, and I'm going to call, just say click to see this. And then I just need to point Tableau to the URL field in my data source. I'll go ahead and click OK. And now I just want to take a quick look at when we're getting a lot of mentions by social media ambassadors. I noticed that there are a lot on July 15th, so I'm going to take a quick look at that. And I can see that there were a lot of conversations happening on social media on that day. I'm going to go ahead and click on one of those mentions. I can now click to see the specific tweet that Emily here sent. Let's take a quick look. This tweet is actually, Emily had actually retweeted a tweet by Steve here. And let's take a quick look at this. It has the hashtag TFS Steve. TFS stands for Tableau Fringe Festival, which is a community-driven virtual conference. It's run by the community for the community. And it turns out that Tableau Fringe Festival happened on this day. And that's why I'm seeing so much conversation happen on that particular day. Not only that, but I can also look at the traffic that was referred by social media ambassadors' blogs on that day. And I can see that a lot of technical content was shared on that day, such as knowledge base articles, technical documents, and a forum thread. This is something we see commonly, but one thing to note is that there was a lot of content and resources being shared around the Tableau Fringe Festival. Tableau users were sharing lots of great resources with each other, so it makes sense that we would get a lot of traffic to our website from those sources. And also we saw a fair amount of traffic to things like our index page. So it seems that this organic conversation was also driving some brand awareness. So what I've done here, in just about 15 minutes or so, I've been able to ask a question related to my goals, explore my data, and see stories emerge. And the power of this, as we've been talking about, is that it's unique to my own specific goals, the goals we have for our social program. I could even then share this dashboard with someone else to communicate the impact of the story that I've discovered in this data. So I've now explored and presented this data in a way that makes sense for my use case. But let's take a look at a couple of other ways you could explore and present Simply Measured data for other use cases.
Before we hop to that,
yeah?
One last thing to say is that you keep talking about how you are using this integration to solve your specific needs, your specific use cases. Well, in 15 minutes, we were able to get to the core of your unique needs. You're not the one who's actually unique. It's every analyst, every manager, every social director out there has these challenges. Your goals are in driving awareness, engagement, in many cases, ultimately revenue. And being able to do this lets you really hone in on what matters, because at the end of the day, what we're all trying to do is monitor and measure and really manage all of our social data. And what we're able to do here is tie it all together in an unprecedented way to let you actually do this at a level that was simply not possible before. And it's just so incredible to think about, and the fact that this was also 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for me, this fundamentally changes everything, and I hope everyone on this webinar understands, too, the power of actually breaking down these silos and connecting this. There's no excuse to not be able to manage and measure your data in the exact way that you need for your business. It really unlocks so much of the value of social that's been trapped and siloed.
Mm-hmm. So as we've built this dashboard from scratch in a very way that's specific for my use case, we've pulled together a couple of other example dashboards and take these as just that, examples. These are specific examples of what can be created in an ad hoc way for specific use cases. So the first dashboard looks at cross-channel social performance. And I should mention before I dive into these, we've actually published these to Tableau Public, which is Tableau's free platform, and we'll be sharing links for this at the end of the presentation. You can actually check out those links, and you can interact with these dashboards right on the web. You can even download them and reverse engineer them. So this visualization looks at post performance over time, broken down by different channels, and it's specifically looking at different brands. You could interact with this by choosing a different brand, dig into their posts. You can change the date range that it's looking at, and you can also take a look at different types of engagement. So, for instance, you could look at the number of likes that each piece of content is getting. And you can also drill down to look at post performance over specific days.
So one thing that was so cool when you first showed this to me is that in all of the, 50-plus reports that we've built, I think we've counted, there's over 1,000 different visualizations. None of ours are actually this exact way, and it was really cool to actually be able to empower you to say, how have you been thinking about this? Build this exact dashboard. So it was just so awesome, and I'm just really looking forward to seeing what are all the other things that other people are going to build too. It literally blows my mind.
Mm-hmm. And you could see like one brand having this dashboard and another having a very similar dashboard but a different visualization on the bottom. All of this is something that you can build in a way that makes sense for you and helps you accomplish your specific goals. So the second dashboard that we have created and published for you is a social media competitive analysis. This looks at the same brands that are in the other dashboard, but the top is a bump chart. This looks at the top 10 performing or top 5 performing brands in terms of the number of mentions they're receiving. You can track them over time. So say, for instance, we wanted to take a look at this brand. This one is KitchenAid, and it was number 1 of all of these different brands in terms of mentions in the month of April. I can go ahead and click into that, and I'm going to see things that are very specific for KitchenAid itself. I can see engagements broken down by content type. I can even see some of their top influencers. And this is that dashboard that we showed in the previous slide. Again, this can all be built in Tableau, using that workflow that I showed for our specific use case.
And one thing that's key here, too, is it's interactive. You're drilling in, you're diving in. The storytelling really hits home here because it's not just, I've always wondered when people say this visual tells a story. There's a difference between a visual and a visualization. Like what you've built here is a visualization that you can actually interact with, drive in, and it tells a specific story because it guides you along a path as you're actually investigating. So, it's not like you're starting from scratch to explore. You've created this amazing guideline for anyone within the organization to actually come in and be able to drill in and get the exact same insights that you did.
Absolutely. And even though this is a dashboard, I can actually go into one of these visuals and I can slice and dice it in my own specific way. So say I have another question that arises, I can actually drag and drop things directly here into the view to modify that. So it's extremely exploratory. All right, so with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Lucy for your questions.
Thank you so much, Michelle and Aviel. That was really incredible. So I think at this point, we're going to hand it over some questions you guys have been submitting throughout. We've got some really good ones. The first one's going to be for Aviel. How do we make the initial connection between Simply Measured and Tableau?
It's a great question. So the integration is a Tableau web connector. So within Tableau, you can connect to various data sources, whether it be a database or a web data connector. And when you select web data connector, all you do is you enter in the simplymeasured.com/Tableau URL, and it asks you to put in your API key. You put in your API key, and then it gives you a list of all of your data sources. You select the data sources that you want to bring in Tableau, click Continue, and then within a couple minutes or a couple seconds, depending on the amount of data you have, we've created a data source inside of Tableau that is in there, and you can even upload it to your Tableau server. It basically creates, to get a little more technical, it's a Tableau data extract. So it basically is a live, persistent data connection to all of your Simply Measured data. So again, all it really takes is for you to copy in your API key, which is accessible for Simply Measured API customers at developers.simplymeasured.com.
Awesome. And then this one's from Michelle. I have Simply Measured, but I don't have Tableau. How do I get this?
Great question. So absolutely, I would recommend checking out our free trial. Go to tableau.com/trial, and you can download a fully functioning Tableau trial, and you can connect your Simply Measured data to it, just as Aviel mentioned. And so one other thing that I would recommend is those URLs that are shown on screen right there. Those are those dashboards we just showed, the tabsoft.co/cross-channel, etc. You can actually go to those URLs, and you can download the dashboards created there. And if you have the free trial of Tableau, you can go ahead and dig right into those with sample data, but then you can even bring in your own Simply Measured data if you want to as well.
And don't think that you're alone. So on the Simply Measured side, we're completely set up with in-house Tableau experts. Our professional services team will work with you to build Tableau dashboards and get you set up with Tableau as well. So if you're an existing customer, reach out to your account manager. If you're an account executive, if you are a new customer, reach out to an account executive. And we really are going to make this as easy as possible. So if you don't have Tableau or you're not a Tableau expert, we'll get you up and running and have this same power in your hands very, very quickly.
And segueing off that, we have a question here. Is there a set of established templates or dashboards for beginners in this process?
So I'd say for the Simply Measured side, we are actually in the process of building out a bunch of those, and we plan on making those publicly available within the next couple weeks. And then, Michelle, maybe just from the general Tableau side, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, I would recommend taking a look at those dashboards that you can find at those links. They're great starting points. However, I would encourage you to explore, your own questions from that starting point. We also have a website or a web page on our site that will show examples of social media visualizations in general. I believe that's tableau.com/social-data. What you can do is simply go to tableau.com and search in the search box for social media, and that should bring you right to our social media page, which is a great collection of resources for social media dashboards, white papers about social media. It's really kind of a go-to place for looking at starting points for social media data in Tableau.
Awesome. Thank you. Aside from URLs, can you talk more about the other objects that can be joined across platforms?
Great. So hopefully I understand this question correctly. If not, feel free to just message back in the platform. But in Tableau, you can blend data on any common field. So what we saw there was we were blending on a date field, but any other field in the data source, such as like channel, you could blend on that if you had it in both data sources. Another example might be like engagements count. So maybe you're working with multiple social media data sources and they both have a field for engagements. You could blend on that as well. So essentially any common field in your data source, you can blend on that.
So I actually have a great story here, and I'm going to sort of do two birds with one stone, because one of the other questions that's in here is, can you give an example of how you've seen this integration help a business make impact? Help a business, that's what it says, but get the point. But at any rate, there's this amazing example of it's a company that publishes, it's a content company, it's a publisher, and they have a whole bunch of different contributors who all have access to their Facebook page, and they post their content out on Facebook. So now for that business, the challenge is they have these writers that they pay. So they have inside of their CRM, they know that writer's Facebook handle that's posting on the page. And at the same time, they have their revenue data as far as how much money are we actually paying this writer for their content. And then in a whole other area, they have their web traffic data to actually figure out how many visits is this content actually getting. So what they've actually been able to do with this integration is connect that CRM data, and so the key there is actually the Facebook profile. So they're connecting that Facebook profile to that individual that they actually pay money to. So now they've connected that Facebook profile to dollars. And then on top of that, they're connecting it to the web analytics data. So they actually have been able to build a dashboard where they can basically rank all of their contributors by engagement, visits, dollars, slice and dice, and they can keep it extremely up to date. So they can know, how did someone, yesterday, who are our top performers? Are we actually properly aligned? Should we keep this person? Should we be paying this person more money? So it's pretty interesting because as a business who actually makes money on social, they're able to connect all of that together. And I don't know how they would do that without an integration like this. So URL is obviously one of the main ones, but people as well is another very key thing to connect to your CRM and the rest of your data.
Awesome. That's a perfect example. I love it.
And we have another question here. What do you mean when you say the connector refreshes automatically?
So what the connector creates is it creates a Tableau extract. So what you can do is at any time you can click on the data source tab. So we saw earlier we were in the workbook tab, and you can click refresh and it'll refresh the data. In addition, if you're actually a Tableau server customer, you can upload that extract into your Tableau server and you can have that extract update on an interval. And that interval can be defined by you. So basically, depending on how you choose to implement it, the data can be as close to real time as you want. So what the connector actually does is it connects to Simply Measured, and it's our job to make sure that you have the most accurate, up-to-date data. And then whatever that refresh interval you chooses, that's what you will have inside of the visualizations that you've built in Tableau.
And another question here, where can I look at the API? When will we have access to the API?
So if you're a Simply Measured customer, you can go to developers.simplymeasured.com, and after you log in, you'll be able to see all of the docs and play around with and look through all of that. That's the answer there, developers.simplymeasured.com.
And exactly what social platforms does Tableau report on? So we know that historically Facebook and Instagram don't allow APIs to pull most data.
So essentially, the data, Tableau is not pulling data from Facebook and Instagram. Tableau is pulling data from Simply Measured. So, one of the things that we do here at Simply Measured, and I'd say what we really are the best in the world at, is social data and analytics. So it's our job to be able to get access to every data point available and make sure it's as accurate as possible. So there are tons of challenges around interacting with the Instagram API, the Facebook API, and we take all of the difficulty out of that. Really all that you do, and Michelle got to experience this, is she just goes in there and she selects her various Tableau accounts, or in the case of those samples, those others, and all of the data is there in the exact format in a very logical way to work with it. So another thing to recognize here too is that it is not actually just when you are working with those specific networks, their APIs may not make the most sense. You may have to make a whole bunch of different API calls. It's not in the format that you want. We take all of the struggle out of that so that you have all of the right data in the right context. We may be hitting many different APIs, even from the same provider to compile that, but we do all of that hard work for you.
And I think this one is directed towards Michelle. Do you need the Tableau Cloud to connect to Simply Measured, or a regular Tableau account can work?
To connect to Simply Measured, you can actually, it will actually work on Tableau Desktop and Tableau Public. I referenced both of those, so I'll just give a quick breakdown. The demo was in Tableau Desktop, and that is our data visualization platform that allows you to connect to many different data sources, and including several databases, as well as Excel files, and blend those data sources. Now, Tableau Public is a free version of that. It connects to fewer data sources, and it is designed for public data and working with data and publishing it as interactive visualizations to the web. But they both function the same way. They're both a drag and drop interface. So with the Simply Measured connector, you can actually connect, you can use both Tableau Desktop and Tableau Public. So I would recommend checking both of them out. what I would do is check out the demo for or the free trial for Tableau Desktop. Download that and connect to the visualizations that we publish on Tableau Public with that. So you can, if you have Tableau Desktop, you can connect to anything on Tableau Public as well.
Got it. And one other thing I want to reiterate here, too, as far as more information, is that you'll see on the screen there's the link get.simplymeasured.com API request. So I highly recommend that as a next step, because we will help walk you through everything around the documentation, integration, all the different things that you can do with it. So that is definitely the right point to go. That kind of answers a bunch of the questions that I'm seeing pop up right now in chat.
Great. And we do have a question. Can you please show a quick demo to connect to sample social media data?
Sure.
Yeah.
We can do that.
Yeah.
Let's. Do you want to get that set up? Oh, why don't you just grab the key and copy and paste it before you do that?
Sounds great.
So answer another question while she gets this set up right now.
Okay. So while we get that set up to answer the question about connecting a sample social media data set, Aviel, can you please give an example of how you've seen this integration, the Tableau Simply Measured integration, or one of its nature, help a business make an impact?
Yeah, so the example that I gave before about the company that was essentially his publisher company that was using that to actually tie those users, their posters back to what they were actually paying them for the content they were creating is a valuable one. I would say another area too is something that we do here at Simply Measured, which is that, at the end of the day, social cannot be siloed. We have their social data, there's web analytics data, and I know looking at other people around the room, we also use tons of marketing automation tools, and we have a CRM. And one amazing thing that I've played around with and done too is actually to be able to look at various people who have interacted with our account on social and be able to tie that back to people who are either in our funnel or people that have interacted with us before. So if we actually do have that context of those people who that social account is attached to something else, to be able to actually tie that data together can help us make better decisions as far as, how do we help move them through the pipeline, make them successful on Simply Measured. And that really does make an impact when you're able to actually tie what's going on in social to where they are in the other parts of the business. It makes no sense for your community management and social team to be operating with someone in this context, while maybe your account management team is operating them with a different one, and it really helps to break that down.
Great. So we have the connector set up for you. So I'm going to give a very quick demo of how to actually connect to the Simply Measured connector. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share that dashboard that we were working off of. And all I need to do to connect to the Simply Measured data is select Data in Tableau and New Data Source. And now here you can see all of the connectors that Tableau will allow you to connect to natively. And Web Data Connector is right here. All you need to do is select Web Data Connector, and you go to developers.simplymeasured.com/Tableau. Now you'll have, as Aviel mentioned, an API token and a refresh token. Now I've copied my API token, and I'm going to go ahead and grab my refresh token as well. And now I have the option to bring in several different types of data. I can, for instance, look at Twitter or Instagram. Let's take a look at Twitter. And I'll select all Twitter user data sources. And here I'm given the option to access the most recent 10,000 posts, or the most recent 10,000 mentions, or the last year of daily metrics. Now, I'm going to connect to the 10,000 recent mentions, which is the exact one you saw me demo previously. And with that, Tableau is bringing in the data, and it's going to appear exactly as you saw in the demo, with all of the fields appearing on your right, and you being able to drag and drop to build visualizations and analyze your data.
And while we wait here, just a few quick questions here. What type of social data can we get from Simply Measured? Platforms, own channels, organic listening, or both?
Say that again? Sorry, I was staring at the screen intently.
Oh, what type of social data can we get from Simply Measured? Platforms, own channels, organic listening, or both?
So it actually is a bit of both. Right now, the focus is mostly on your own channels as well as the mentions around that. But as we move forward, we're going to include more listening and more listening data sources in that as well. So really, it's all the things inside of the Simply Measured platform and products will be available over time in this integration.
And Michelle, does this work with both Tableau 9 and 10? Will there be any difference for Tableau 10?
It does work in both Tableau 9 and 10, and it's the same connection experience. You simply connect to a web data connector, and you can bring in the same exact data for both Tableau 9 and Tableau 10.
Okay, great. Can we blend Simply Measured data with, say, owned data in a MySQL database?
Yeah, so you definitely can. So as I mentioned at the start of this, with the Simply Measured API, everyone's laughing about how Lucy said MySQL.
What is it? How do you say it?
You nailed it.
I nailed it. Thank you.
Good enough. So essentially, the Simply Measured API can integrate with code that you write, with databases, or with platform visualization platforms like Tableau. So you can create a custom integration where you can gather data from the Simply Measured API and insert it directly into your SQL database. That is something that we are currently doing for customers, and our professional services team is also here and ready to help you as far as how to get that done. And yeah, that's a very, very common use case. What we talked about today and the power of this is that if you don't want to have to go through IT, think about having a SQL database or any of that, this integration makes that so easy. But you 100% can go that other route. The API really lets social data free, and that's the power of it, and you can do anything with it.
Okay, and Sarah, I'm sorry, Michelle. Wow, long day. you want to go in here and let people know what we have here?
Yeah, so we've just brought in the Simply Measured data that looks at mentions, same one that I demoed previously. And you can see here in this preview pane, after you connect to that data, it's showing you the fields in your data source. It's showing you that it's automatically recognized the date field, etc. So once that all looks good to me, I can go ahead and just open up a sheet in Tableau, and you can see all of these data sources right here. Same ones we saw. We can take a look at number of mentions. We can break it down by date, do all of the same things that we did previously.
If we're running a campaign and we have 20 posts going out that month, can we get data for those 20 posts specifically?
Yeah, so as long as that data is in in your full data set in Simply Measured,
which it will be.
Yep. In Tableau, you can absolutely pull the specific field or the specific records out. You could do things like that ad hoc grouping that I showed. You can even filter your data in Tableau on the data source level. So you could actually set it up so that it's only bringing in data from Simply Measured that's specifically for that campaign.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. So at the Tableau level, you really can just create those groupings. So if you're trying to do specific campaign measurement, and again, you can also pull in cross-channel data. So it can be great for just tagging things and creating those data groupings.
Yeah.
So you can actually look at the engagement just specific to that campaign. I'd say in Simply Measured in our product today, we also offer a labeling functionality, which lets you label your specific posts, so the rest of the Simply Measured reporting platform can actually do a similar grouping, and that the API itself offers a whole bunch of complex filtering and searching. So if you are working directly with a Simply Measured API, you can tell it to only return metrics and analytics that are relevant to posts that match the specific keyword or various other criteria. So it's really powerful. You can do it in Tableau, you can do it in Simply Measured, and you can do it directly in the API.
Awesome. All right. Wow, that hour went quickly. We still have some questions here, but we will be getting back to you and following up on those. I want to thank Aviel and Michelle and everyone for attending today's webinar. And if you have other questions, please contact your account manager. Let us know on Twitter. If you'd like to sign up to have this kind of data visualization in your own organization, you can go to any of the links on this slide. And once you leave the webinar, you'll receive a survey on the presentation, and we'd really appreciate it if you complete that and provide your feedback. So on behalf of Simply Measured and Tableau, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
This conference is no longer being recorded.